Alongside the gentleman himself, Aron Ralston, Dave Morris here in Norman at the Embassy Suites. It's the Explore Oklahoma Healthcare Summit. You are here to talk to those in attendance here, and we'll get to that in just a second. First of all, very nice to meet you. Thank you for your time.
No, I appreciate it, and thank you for having me.
And this is one of the things you do right now is you talk to various groups, fundraisers, and charities about your experience and about motivation, I guess. You were just in Detroit, now you're in Oklahoma City. You still stay pretty busy bouncing around, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, between my family commitments, I have 2 kids, and they live in 2 different time zones, so I've split my time between them. And then also getting to do the work that I get to do, which I look at it all as a gift, really, that among the many gifts that have come into my life since 12 years ago when I walked into Blue John Canyon, that I get the chance now to share my experience there and hopefully make it relevant and encourage people in the boulders that they might face in life.
I do want to talk about the boulders. I've watched some of your motivational speeches, and you really hit on the boulders, and I think that's a great analogy. Aron, of course, was rock climbing in Utah in 2003. The story's been told many, many times, and by far better than I will do, but stuck there, had to amputate the arm to escape. Basically, you say, hey, you died, and then you walked away to freedom. You looked at that as a turning point, and perhaps the camera, when you're recording yourself at that point, that was your turning point, right?
It was a series of those kinds of pivots that when I found myself trapped, I had to first understand that I'd created this situation and that I was then therefore going to have to be the one that created a new reality that came up with the solution, that nobody was going to swoop in and save me.
Because you made that decision early on that you were going to do this. No one knew you were doing it. So
I was by myself.
You owned that opportunity right there.
Exactly. It's about being accountable. And that was an important first step. And then as I came to understand, okay, I'm not going to be able to get myself out of here, I'm going to die here, there was another pivot where I had to come to accept that this has been my life and what have I learned from it. I tried to go through at least some analysis and to understand the lessons of what my life had meant and to understand really what the gifts that even that boulder were giving me through that process, to understand that life had not just been about achievements, accomplishments, the goals that I had set and gained for myself, but that it was about the relationships of life too. And certainly that was a huge, even a revelation to come to understand for a type A person like myself who had been very driven and goal-oriented, that it was more about the interactions with the people. It was about the love that I had had in life. That was a great development for me, that even an epiphany to come to that understanding. And then there was the pivot at the end, which was the moment when I stepped out of my grave and into my life again, to have the chance to get back to those people who I'd been recording messages to send to them from what would be beyond the grave, that my parents, my mom, my dad, that was with my sister, with all of my closest friends, and to be able to say to them that I was sorry for what I'd put them through, that I was sorry that I had been in so many ways more self-centered than what I would like to have been in life, that I hadn't told them that I loved them as much as that I would have liked to have expressed, all the regrets that I then had the chance to get back to them and not only say those things, to implement the lessons in my life and to continue really with my passions as they still are today. I mentioned my children, but also that I love getting out in the outdoors. Tomorrow I get home to Colorado and I'll be climbing up in Rocky Mountain National Park and to spend time in the wilderness. And you put all that together, and I'm very blessed today. And I hope that other people can see that even if you're in the moment of a dark time, that there is a light out there, and ultimately you arrive in a better place because of the trauma that we've gone through in life.
2 things. You mentioned when you pulled out that camera, that's when you sort of figured out, and perhaps other people can figure out, who's the person you would talk to, and what are the things that you would say. That is perhaps the most meaningful thing in your life.
I think that to confront that kind of a question and to understand that where I was when I got that camera, I was not just in the bottom of a canyon. I was in my grave at that point.
That was the end of the book there.
It was. And to then have the opportunity to say a few things, what do you say? you put yourself there. Who do you say those things to? And the answers to those questions, I think, reveal a lot about what's important to you in your life.
Don't you think that would
values.
change throughout life? Perhaps in your 20s, it's a certain
absolutely.
person, perhaps your college buddies or whatever. Later in life, it's the loved one. Later in life, it's family. Don't you think that changes, though?
It should. That I certainly am glad that I'm not as, I guess, the same person I was when I was 15 or 25 or even
we all grow from
6
our
years ago.
experiences.
Yeah, that's part of maturing. And yet, at any given moment, it does reveal, most importantly, what's of such critical value that it percolates to the top of the list. And that's, in my mind, then one of the gifts that boulder gave to me was to understand, what is it, Aron, that's important to you? As I'm eulogizing myself and reaching out to people from, posthumously, as it was, that's how I thought that video would be seen. It showed me that it wasn't, I mentioned about graduating at the top of my class from high school or from college or having a prestigious engineering career or having left that behind to become a mountain guide, to follow my passion and live my dream. None of that made the tape. And it was about
the people,
being able to say
the relationships,
that I love you and that I'm sorry, and that in the end, I wish that I had been better. What it gave me was a perspective when I did leave the canyon. It was that beacon that I have been very fortunate to have in my life, to say, here is a vision that I was able to have of what it would be like to be a better person in my life. And now, okay, am I living to that? I've been back to that boulder and that canyon a dozen times over all the years now. It's been 12 years since then. And that every time as I've stood there and I put my arm up and I stand next to that rock, and it's literally a touchstone, so that as I put myself back, I can reflect, am I living to those epiphanies, those revelations, those lessons?
Hey, Aron, a dozen years ago, you said this. Where are you at?
Exactly.
Are you still doing this?
Exactly. And it's anyone who is in relationship, whether it's with friends, with family, as a parent now, it's absolutely incumbent on us to reflect on those relationships. And am I present there? Am I doing the best that I can as a parent to guide my kids and to be there in their lives?
Really invested as much as you think you are. Hey, I'm doing the right things here, but when you stop and slow down, maybe I should dial in a little bit closer.
How many of us? I mean, we all are given this, the distractions of having a space-age computer in our pockets at every moment that can distract us to no end, and among a million other things. That am I there in my life? Am I doing what I need to be doing? For me, it gives me also that space to consider. Okay, am I doing what I'm here on this planet to be doing? Part of it, I'm very blessed to be able to say yes, and I get to share about that experience to help other people. None of us are here just to enrich our own lives. I really firmly believe that we're here to enrich the lives of others, to take care of, be stewards of this planet. And that, to me, again, one of those, it sets the bar, and I get to say, okay, yes, I am, or I could be doing better still. We're always only ever on a path. We've never reached the destination.
Sure.
And it's the way that I get to see, okay, here's my milepost, and am I still making progress?
I think you're right about that. It's not about what you want to be when you grow up. It's about exploring and those different experiences along the way. You mentioned boulders, and you mentioned the space-age devices we have in our pockets. Let me ask you this. Your analogy about boulders we'll get to, and there's a difference between what you consider is a boulder in your life versus the gravel and rocks that might just be uncomfortable on your journey. I mentioned, hey, I had a Band-Aid on my fingers. I was chopping vegetables last night, and you're like, oh, really? Really? You chopped the... What?
This one time. No, I got a story to tell you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a green pepper involved. What would you tell people when they think, hey, I've got this big boulder in my life? Perspective. What is really a boulder, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
And it is. And sometimes the perspective is to see that the boulder that we think, well, really, is it that bad? Like, okay, Aaron, so you missed your connection and now they can't get you on another flight and you're supposed to be in Palm Springs for an event and you can't get there. Like, okay, is this the worst thing that's ever happened to you? No. Did you have to drink your own urine today, Aaron? Like, I use that on myself.
Did that 3 days in a row, come on.
Yeah, it's almost a weekly basis at this point, because we do build up and we think that sometimes our problems are a lot bigger. Like we can make the mountains out of the molehills, and I do it too. That's one shift in perspective. Another one is to see that, well, sometimes what you might see as being the boulder, but is really the blessing. And that's in the end what I have to say about like my entrapment, my amputation.
Because you use the boulder as a tool to get free.
Well, it was a very literal shift that, yes, not only did this, the agent of my entrapment become actually the enabler of my freedom, my liberation, my
a heck of a way to look at it.
That it was the boulder that eventually like held my arm so that I could break the bones and finally solve the riddle of how do you cut your arm off
with a dull knife.
With a knife that's too dull to get through those bones. That it's that shift to say when perhaps it's a diagnosis of cancer in your family, that it's a diagnosis of depression, of okay, all of a sudden you're married and now it's time for the divorce. That there are things, all of this, that I've been through just those three things, having lost friends, to suicide, to blindsided by a death that came out of nowhere, that we are all experiencing all of these things all of the time. And yet they also come with their gifts. That, to me, going through what I did in the most blunt term possible, is to say that it was not at all a situation where I felt that it was horrific or that I wish that it had never happened. This was one of the greatest things that's ever happened for me in my life. That I didn't lose anything when I cut my arm off. I gained my entire life back, as well as the lessons and the gifts that came along from the experience of actually being there during that time. It's in any given moment then, the boulder, as we might perceive it, we, I believe, choose to see it as the burden that's crushing us, that's pinning us there to the wall, that threatens our life. Or we choose to see it as being this gift that comes to show us what is important, that videotape, and who do you talk to, what do you say, that it shows us what we're capable of, that I endured far more than I would have ever believed possible for myself in my life, and that I came out of it with this perspective. And in the end, that it shows us what's worth living for, what's worth fighting for. And those are things that only come from adversity. Just because today, there's been reporting here in this last week as we came through the 10th anniversary of Katrina in New Orleans, and that I was reading an article on NPR about, it said that 3 out of 4 people in New Orleans who came through Katrina say that they're better able to cope with stress and to handle trauma in their lives today because of what they went through with Katrina. And that's the gift, that it builds us up for what's going to come next, because it doesn't stop.
Sure.
All the way through, we just the boulders keep coming. And so we have to keep making the choice. Am I going to see this as a burden, or am I going to take it as a blessing? Hopefully that as I share my story, I can remind people, even as they are perhaps seeing something in their life as a burden, that there is still a choice to make, that there's a shift that they could undergo too.
Last thing, Aron Ralston here. He's at the Embassy Suites here in Norman, speaking at the Oklahoma Healthcare Summit, presented by Plico. And we're doing this interview before your keynote to wrap up this conference. Mm-hmm. What will you be talking about today?
Yeah, for the folks here, there's a lot of doctors, healthcare administrators, professionals in the industry, that the challenges they face, the boulders that are in front of them, and these boulders aren't just ones that affect them and their professions. These are boulders that they certainly cast across our entire nation. Healthcare spending, each and every one of us, our experiences with our own health and with the healthcare system. That what I hope to talk again is to share about my experience to give them maybe a bit of a boost, maybe that shift in perspective, that there's still the regulation, the oversight, the electronic health records. I mean, so many, like anything that ranges from headache all the way to these potentially catastrophic flaws that still exist and permeate our experiences in healthcare, to help the people here to be able to have a sense of encouragement, maybe to have that shift in perspective that ignites something that's, well, they're going to make a difference because of what they've experienced or gone through. Maybe it's just on a personal level. There's someone here who's going through something at home within maybe their community.
You make that connection through something they hear you say on stage.
And I hear back from a lot of people about it, that there could very well be a doctor who's going through depression and who needs a reminder that there's something worth living for. Sometimes it's the caregivers who have to take some time to take care of themselves, to be reminded that life is a lot more than just about work, and that I don't necessarily know what it is that might connect with any given individual, but I do get to know from, well, the aggregate that I hear for people that it made a difference for them, and that whenever they're in that position where, they've just found out that their mom now has brain cancer and she's going to be moving back in with them, but to see it not as that I'm losing my mom, but rather that, okay, we get the next 6 months where she's going to be with us, and we're going to have that time together.
And the memories of those next 6 months. Beyond the stage today, what else are you involved with? Some charitable efforts, I believe?
One of the things I've learned from this is that I care so passionately about the outdoors, and that I try to give back to protect these places. Blue John Canyon in southern Utah, still a place that's not yet free from the threat of drilling, mining, climate change, among many other indigenous threats as they are, that the unmanaged use of motorized vehicles in some of these desert landscapes, all of it coming to mean that I hope to apply a little bit of balance to that, to maybe someday see that very sacred spot protected permanently. That I work with SUA, is Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance, and SUA.org is their website where people can find out more about what's happening in southern Utah, as well as in Colorado, and some of the similar kinds of threats, both to our forests and our mountainscapes, that trying to set some of them aside through, there's a current bill for wilderness legislation that's in front of Congress, that they haven't done much with it in the last few years. We're at a standstill on that front, but we still have the means to take other actions and at least play defense. Again, saying that there are places that are just too special to drill. I know, in Oklahoma, you are certainly home to a great amount of that industry, and also experiencing some of the effects of it. That there are people here who are trying to bring some of that similar balance, and I think that as perhaps a public figure, and certainly someone with a passionate connection to landscapes, we all have that at some point, whether it's the water source that brings our tap water into our homes, and maybe it's about the places we like to go to recreate with our kids, that we have to defend and stand up for those places, because they say, if not us, who? If not now, when? At some point we will have perhaps left everything in a bygone era where we remember what it was like before we went after that last burp of gas or drop of oil, and what we will have lost at that point is unretrievable. So.
And you're lending your voice to those causes.
As best I can.
He's been on Dateline, NBC, Letterman, I believe. You were the question on Jeopardy. $600, right?
I don't know if that's maybe that means I'm more obscure than I think, or what.
And of course, the movie 127 Hours, James Franco, was pretty realistic.
I thought it was incredibly authentic what they did, and I was honored to work with them for that 7 years that it took for us to take the story all the way to where eventually we were walking down the red carpet together. It was amazing.
Blockbuster movie. Aron Ralston, thank you for your time today. AronRalstonSpeaker.com, I believe, is the website.
AronRalstonSpeaker.com, yeah.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, as well. Thank you. Rather, the way I look at this, again, this is the perspective. You know me.